Hope in times of despair. We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Martin Luther King Jr. The thing about times of despair is that people are desperate, so they think and act desperately. Assumptions of people are made before actions are examined and processed. This type of societal mindlessness is why humans don't treat each other nicely when times are tough. Steinbeck points out what society has in store for a society who leaves the desperate behind. To make sense of government spending through unfunded wars and frivolous entitlement programs, we see reserve fractional lending leading to hyperconsumerism. The predatory marketing campaigns lead to conspicuous consumption and a lack of general care for the welfare of those living in modern-day Hoovervilles along our freeways. Drugs not only provide escapism for the homeless, but also those who overindulge in decadence. Did we not learn from the roaring 1920s and the subsequent painful 1930s? With technology and new emerging asset classes, the cliché is becoming all too obvious. The rich get richer and the poor become more destitute. Whether it is on a micro or macro level, John Steinbeck tells us that courtesies must be made. We see this with Tom Joad leaving prison, the Joads and the Wilsons enduring the arduous trip across the Dust Bowl to California by sticking to one another, and the general organization and following of rules in the California co-op camp. It is the type of care for one another which helps hope prevail in times of despair. There is the good and bad in human evolution. This dichotomy is also prevalent in the way we treat each other. Technology serves that bipolar evolutionary path. The bulldozer driver clearing the tenant farmland the Joads once inhabited is an example of the bank deciding to clear the land for cotton production. It became a binary decision for the bulldozer driver where he needed to make that $3 a day and was willing to be a part of upending the Joad family existence to serve his family and paymaster. Truck driver risking his job to pick up Tom Joad as a hitchhiker is another example of self-preservation. In tough times, the driver wanted to help a man clearly down on his luck. As Tom and the driver quickly put small talk behind them, Tom divulges that he was just released from prison for manslaughter. Out on good behavior and a relatively short 4-year sentence considering Tom killed a man in self-defense, Tom was looking to rebuild his life. The driver could only think, is this guy going to kill me next? Self-preservation kicked in rather than empathy and compassion for a man who was trying to climb out of the emotional hole of being institutionalized. To complicate these emotional dynamics, Tom was going to have to rebuild his life in a new world where the growing impoverished class were going to have to as well. Grapes of Wrath examines the emotional delicacy and vulnerability of the downtrodden in a Dust Bowl Depression era, where considering the plight of fellow man and woman was almost impossible. Distilled down to the brass tacks, the proverbial express lane towards self-actualization presents many challenges for one to considering in developing their moral code. It is that code that one develops in determining the elegance in the pursuit of one's dreams. The Joads' dream of an abundant farm life in California elegantly unfolded with the Wilsons as they endured the treacherous path across American heartland. Courtesies were made by considering what you ate in front of another starving family, how you left your campsite in vacating rest sites, how your children played with others, and how you greeted one another as you occupied the same space in passing. Steinbeck masterfully illustrated how humans could be so compassionate while the American living standard was hanging in the balance. Amidst drought and famine, weary Great Depression travelers forged their spirit by constantly extending courtesies where the impulse of self-preservation might ordinarily creep in. The Joads purchased a lemon of a car by an unscrupulous used car salesman. Their car would break down, and the Joads would stay back to make sure the Wilsons were safe. In today's world, I'm not sure how many people would stick together in the face of being stranded in extreme heat with little water and food. I do not want to grow cynical, but my idealism is a warning. Steinbeck's call to leave no one behind is timely for me, as I sense so many people in American life today living in the shadows, becoming increasingly invisible to each other. While technology gives those who have access to opportunity the hope of social mobility, it marginalizes sufferers of mental health issues, rendering them disenfranchised. Society would begin to heal if we as individuals would use technology to collectively embrace our journey to our respective goals rather than view it as a zero-sum race. It is counterintuitive in the face of preserving oneself, but elegant when viewed as a pointillistic painting. Steinbeck powerfully demonstrated this pointillistic approach in the chapter I affectionately refer to as Skitters. The basic premise is that a child at the California camp excessively eats grapes right off the vine, causing extreme diarrhea. They use a lot of tissue in an attempt to clean up. The camp notices a lot of missing tissue and suspects someone is stealing the toilet paper. When the truth unfolds, the camp chairwoman is effusive with empathy. Rather than banishing that family, she uses the camp fund to grant $5 worth of groceries and sends the little girl over to the doctor to treat the digestive malady. The camp chairwoman didn't get ugly. She searched for the truth and elegantly executed a plan which left the family's dignity intact, ready to serve God and their fellow brothers and sisters. Whether it is physical skitters, mental skitters, and or spiritual skitters, I think we could all take a page out of Rosa Sharon's playbook on empathy and rally around victims hitting a rough patch. For if we don't, those very same people often snap, having chosen the perception of self-victimization, internalize anger, and subsequent disenfranchisement. Efficacy is defined by theory as the ability to produce a desired or intended result. Human efficacy can either be defined on an individual basis or approached collectively. If we choose AK, we get so caught up in the details. If we choose pointillism, we achieve societal elegance. Steinbeck is a master philosopher. Grapes of Wrath teaches me to get over myself by abandoning subjectivity for objectivity. This is not to ignore that humans are emotional and social creatures. In my past studies, two of Dostoevsky's main protagonists lived with so much angst it drove Dmitry Karamazov and Rodion Raskolnikov to a maddening, murderous die-function. Today's pressure amplifies the importance humans place on social stratification. It celebrates materialism. It combusts the flames of self-loathing. When someone promotes an act of good deed, the label hater slap-on is noble narcissists. Can we celebrate the net positive and avoid skeptical judgment on intention? On a personal note, I worked with someone I once had fun caring about. She is such a beautiful person when she takes her medication, and something bad happened in her life. Prior to that event happening, she credited me and my father with lifting her out of the dirt. People who noticed were happy that they were wrong about her being a lost cause. She was doing so well. Unfortunately, that bad event triggered self-victimization. She directed the resulting anger towards me and my father, citing that we were tearing her apart and everything she does. She quickly forgot all the good we were trying to do for her. she became emotionally unreasonable and dangerous. For my safety, I will only help her through layers of buffers. This is an example why we rally around those with skitters. Sure, it is dirty and smelly. I can only imagine the rest of my family saying, "I told you it is too dangerous to help the disenfranchised. You aren't qualified." Steinbeck shows us in Grapes of Wrath that the only qualification needed is caring. I just finished the read on the essay Hope in Times of Despair by Avonlea Wang. And even though it is a very hard read, I am happy I accomplished it because the essay and all the little components added into it will help humans and you and me have a more evolved and deeper connection. It's right now around 2:30. The iPad's dead, so I can't check the exact time, but I've been working since 11:02 a.m. And all the hard work, I lost it a few times. But the only thing that held me together was the hope at the end where I could hold Evie, where I could see my brother, where I would finally experience the wind on my face. And the quote by Martin Luther King Jr., "We must accept finite disappointment but never lose infinite hope," really helped glue it together. We can never experience that disappointment for good. There will always be a shine of hope.